And moderator, we have all the participants for this meeting.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Before we call the board to order, would you please provide an overview of the Webex functions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Board President. Welcome to the California Board of Psychology meeting. Before we get started, I would like to remind board members and senior staff who are not speaking to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will interject with a brief friendly reminder or simply mute the microphones. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the Webex question and answer feature, also referred to as Q&A. When the board president reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, public comment will be requested. At the board's direction, I will turn on and announce the opening of the Q&A feature. It is not necessary to identify yourself in order to make a public comment. Please note that the Q&A feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. Once unmuted, the member of the public may verbally state their comment. The Q&A feature is not to be used for typing out questions or for board members to communicate with one another. If any attendees utilize a profane name, they will not be called upon to prevent members of the public from being subjected to profane language. While you are free to express criticism or negative views, for the sake of the members of the public participating on the call, please do not use profane language when making public comment to the board. And now, Mr. Board President, I return the meeting back over to you.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Good morning. I would like to call the Board of Psychology's April board meeting to order. Ms. Berteau, could you please call the roll to establish quorum?
Yes, good morning. Kasuga?
Present.
Cervantes?
Here.
Fu?
Aye.
Harb Sheets?
Aye.
Nystrom?
Here.
Phillips?
Aye.
Riscate? Rogers?
Here.
Tate?
Here.
Roll is complete.
A quorum of the board having established, we are convened, and pursuant to the provisions of Governor Gavin Newsom's Executive Order N2920, dated March 17th, 2020, neither board member locations nor a public meeting location are provided. Public participation may be through the Webex link. If you have trouble getting on the call to listen or participate, please call 916-574-7720. That's 916-574-7720. And our thanks again to our colleagues at Solid for facilitating today's meeting and assisting with the Webex link. Moving on to the President's welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. The Board of Psychology protects consumers of psychological services by licensing psychologists, regulating the practice of psychology, and supporting the evolution of the profession. A couple items for this welcome today. The first is that we heard a lot in our February board meeting about the need for waivers to be extended with more certainty and over a longer time frame. In between our February meeting and today, I know staff have been working internally to communicate that to other agencies that are responsible for allowing us to be able to extend these waivers. This is an ongoing conversation, and I know we'll have an update at our May board meeting on that front, but I wanted to share that here given the level of interest and questions from participants at our February board meeting, so that they're aware that this is an ongoing conversation and that the board has proactively reached out to various agencies so that we can get a little bit more certainty on that front. The second item is that I just want to thank Mr. Clay Jackson, who has served as our counsel for regulatory affairs over the last several months, and to wish him a happy retirement. This is his last board meeting with us, and just to offer our gratitude to him for his counsel over the last several months as our regulatory affairs counsel. So with that, any board member comments, staff comments? Seeing none, I'm going to ask our Madam Moderator to open for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A. All right, if any members of the public would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your use.
And we are going to keep the public comment section open because for item number 3, it will be also public comment for items not on the agenda. And just as a note, the board may not discuss or take any action on any matter raised during this public comment section, except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. This is pursuant to Government Code sections 11.125 and 11.125.7a. As we invite speakers to come forward, I would just ask that individuals making comments to not discuss the specifics, including names as to pending complaints, pending licensing applications, or pending disciplinary actions that may come before the board for a decision. Such discussions are considered ex parte communications as they would provide information to the members that is outside of the record in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. Therefore, such disclosures may create a conflict and interfere with the board's capacity to make necessary determinations. Board staff is available to speak to you individually and answer questions outside of the hearing of board members. You may reach our staff at bopmail@dca.ca.gov. That's B as in Brian, OP as in Peter, mail, M-A-I-L, @dca.ca.gov. The board is eager to listen attentively to your comments, and while there may be some desire to engage in further discussion with comments presented during this time, the board may not discuss or take action as mentioned earlier, except of course to place the matter on a future agenda. This may give the impression that we're not being responsive, but these procedures are critical to ensure the compliance with the Open Meetings Act and to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or the board's mission. So with that, any items for public comments? For public comment not on the agenda, or public comment for items not on the agenda, excuse me.
Hi, this is the moderator, and at this time, I'm seeing no requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's been closed.
All right, so moving to item number 4, this item will be held over until our May meeting. So we will not take up this item today. So item number 5.
All right.
I turn this over to our chair of the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee, Ms. Cervantes.
Thank you, Mr. Fu. So agenda item number 5 is an update from the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee, and we'll be discussing some of our bills. This year, I'm excited to work alongside Dr. Kasuga and Dr. Phillips on the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee. We had our first meeting on Friday, March 19th, and as we progress through the agenda, we'll review the recommendations that emerge from the committee. There are 2 bills we will review today that were not reviewed during the committee meeting. The bills are SB 731 Durazo and AB 562 Low. And the reason for that, it was the timing of the meeting in March and the need to post our agenda for public viewing ahead of time. So we'll discuss those today. Also, Ms. Rivera is going to help me. She's going to present the background of each bill, and I'll present the committee recommendation and lead the discussion portion. So let's get started. Item 5A is board-sponsored legislation. Item 5A1 are amendments to Section 2960 and 2960.1 of the Business and Professions Code regarding denial, suspension, and revocation for acts of sexual contact. This is now SB 401 by Senator Pan and begins on page 1 of the hand carry materials. Ms. Rivera.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, in early 2019, Senator Pan carried SB 275 to amend sections 2960 and 2960.1. Given the COVID-19 pandemic and the request from leadership to minimize the bill load, SB 275 was amended and became a bill about personal protective equipment. Consequently, in December 2020, board staff contacted Senator Pan's office to ask whether he would consider carrying legislation pertaining to this issue. In February of this year, Senator Pan agreed to carry the bill and introduced SB 401, Psychology, Unprofessional Contact, Disciplinary Action, Sexual Acts. Under current law, when an investigation finds that a psychologist had sexual contact with a client, patient or former client within 2 years of termination of therapy, the proposed discipline that the ALJ recommends to the Board of Psychology for adoption must include a recommendation for an order of revocation. The board maintains ultimate adjudicatory discretion over the adoption of the final discipline against a licensee, but current law ensures that in instances sexual contact, including sexual intercourse, revocation must be the discipline recommended by an ALJ. Now, current law defines sexual contact as meaning the touching of an intimate part of another person. Additionally, current law defines an intimate part as a sexual organ, anus, groin, or buttocks of any person and the breast of a female. The board proposes adding sexual behavior to Section 2960 of the Business and Professions Code due to the board's experiences adjudicating cases involving inappropriate sexual conduct that did not meet the current definition of sexual contact, which left the board hamstrung in achieving appropriate discipline for sexual behavior antithetical to the psychotherapist-client relationship. It made it exceedingly difficult to achieve disciplinary terms that match the egregiousness of the acts. The board believes that sexual behavior in the psychotherapist-client relationship by the licensed professional is one of the most flagrant ethical violations possible, as it violates the duty of care inherent in a therapeutic relationship, abuses the trust of the client, and can create harmful, long-lasting emotional and psychological effects. The board wants to ensure that egregious sexual behavior with a client, sexual misconduct, and sexual abuse is unprofessional conduct that merits the highest level of discipline. Therefore, this proposal would add sexual behavior with a client or former client to the list of what is considered unprofessional conduct that would give the ALJ the statutory authority in a proposed decision to include an order of revocation. The proposal also adds clear definitions to the following sexual acts: sexual abuse, sexual behavior, sexual contact, and sexual misconduct. Note, this would not change or diminish the board's adjudicatory discretion as the final discipline. Under this proposal, sexual behavior would be defined as inappropriate contact or communication of a sexual nature for the purpose of sexual arousal, gratification, exploitation, or abuse. Sexual behavior does not include the provision of appropriate therapeutic interventions relating to sexual issues. Examples of sexual behaviors include, but are not limited to, kissing a client, touching or exposing oneself inappropriately, sending sexually suggestive or sexually explicit sexting, messages or emails to a client, and sending clients photos that include nudity, genitals, or sexually suggestive poses. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Committee voted to recommend the board support SB 401. On March 22, 2021, SB 401 passed out of the Senate Business, Professions, and Economic Development Committee with a vote of 14-0. It is currently in the Senate Appropriations Committee and will be heard on April 5th, 2021.
Madam Chair, move to support SB 401 as we are the sponsor of the bill. This is Seiron.
Thank you, Mr. Fu. Can I get a second?
I second. This is Dr. Kasuga.
Is there any further board comment? Ms. Nystrom?
Yes, this is Julie Nystrom. I'm going to recuse myself on this item given my employment with the State Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nystrom. Any other board comment? Can, Madam Moderator, can we open up public comment for this item?
Sure. This is the moderator, and I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference, and we have an Elizabeth Winkleman who would like to make a comment. Elizabeth, I'll let you know when you've been unmuted. And Elizabeth, you've been unmuted.
Hi, it's Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman from the California Psychological Association. I did mention that the legislative committee meeting, but I wanted to thank the board members and the board staff for working with us, with our organization, to address our concerns with earlier versions of this bill. And we now have a neutral position, and I just wanted to thank you all again for working with us.
Thank you, Dr. Winkleman. And there are no additional requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's been closed.
Okay, thank you. So board members, we have a motion by Mr. Fu to approve the staff recommendation to support SB 401, and it was seconded by Dr. Kasuga. If there is no additional comments from board members, can we call the roll?
Okay. Kasuga,
Aye.
Cervantes,
Aye.
Fu,
Aye.
Harb Sheets,
Aye.
Nystrom abstained. Phillips,
Aye.
Riscate, Rogers,
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
So is was board member Rescate, is she not voting, or?
She is not here.
Oh,
She's
okay.
absent. Thank you.
So the motion carries. Thank you so much. Before we move on to the next item, I'd just like to thank Senator Pan for sticking with us on this, and his staff member, Ms. Faith Lee, for her work on this bill as well. Thank you, everyone. Items 5A2 and 5A3 will be discussed during the sunset discussion, which is agenda item number 6. So we're going to skip those for now. Item 5B is a review of the bills for active position recommendations. Item 5B1 is AB 54 Kylie, COVID-19 emergency order violation license revocation. This item can be found on page 11 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera?
Yes, thank you. This bill would prohibit boards under the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control from revoking a license for failure to comply with any COVID-19 emergency orders unless the board or department can prove that a lack of compliance resulted in transmission of COVID-19. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee agreed with the staff recommendation to watch AB 54 Kylie. On January 11th, this bill was referred to the Committee on Business and Professions and Government Organization. It has not been set for hearing.
Okay.
Staff recommends. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Staff recommends the board watch AB 54.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Are there any board comments? Okay, thank you. Seeing none. Moderator, can we please open the public comment?
Thank you. All right, we have opened up the Q&A panel. If anyone would like to make a comment, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists.
Seeing no public comment, is there?
There isn't. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Since the recommendation is watch, we won't be taking a vote on this, but I just want to create the opportunity for any additional board member comments in case I missed anybody. Is there any? Okay, thank you. We're going to move to item 5B2, AB 1236 by Ting, Healing Arts Licensees Data Collection. This is page 13 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera.
Thank you. This bill would require all boards that oversee healing arts licensees to collect specified demographic information and to post the information on the internet websites that they each maintain. Information shall be collected at the time of the initial electronic application for licensure or license renewal. Beginning July 2022, it would require each board or the Department of Consumer Affairs on its behalf to provide the information annually to the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development. The bill would require these boards to maintain the confidentiality of the information they receive from licensees and to only release information in aggregate form as specified. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee voted to watch AB 1236 and directed the chair of the committee and staff to have a conversation with the author's office about the data points being collected to allow a more informed discussion at the April 2021 board meeting. This bill is currently in the Business and Professions Committee, and it has not been set for hearing. The board staff recommends the board watch AB 1236.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. After our discussion on March 19th, board staff and I met with the author staff and the bill sponsors. We had a good discussion, but there was we were left with some ambiguity. And so on this bill, I'd like to propose something a little different than what we normally do when we consider bills. And that is to send a letter indicating our support of the concept of collecting demographic data from licensees, but continue working with the author and sponsors in developing language so that we can reach a position of support. Specifically, in our discussions, we identified several issues with the language. First, the current language creates a flexibility to administer a survey, a voluntary survey at the time of application or renewal, or a biennial random sample survey. The latter would incur more costs to boards, especially smaller boards like ours. The current language leaves out two important diversities that we identified and discussed during our March 19th meeting. They were sexual orientation and disability. The questions or the areas that the legislation wants to get information about are somewhat out of context for the doctoral level workforce that we regulate in psychology. And so, and the sponsors shared with us that some of the data points were influenced by labor management relations, which is different than the type of work that most psychologists, most of our licensees are involved with. A related concern is extending the license process by administering a survey at the time of renewal or at the time of application. There's also some language about reporting. It says reporting, and then there's some language that says data, data passing to, for example, the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development. If it's a report that we need to produce, that's different than just passing along data points. So those are some of the points we identified that we want to address in a letter to the author and the sponsors of this legislation. So that is what I have on this. Is there a motion to? Let me ask Ms. Sorick for clarification. Ms. Sorick, can I ask for a motion to author a letter indicating our support for the concept of collecting demographic data from licensees, but continue working with the author and sponsor in developing the language? Is that precise enough, or?
I think so, and I would defer a little bit on that to Mr. McGuire, but
Okay.
I think you know, what we had talked about after our conversation with the author and sponsor of the bill was that we were supportive of the concept of data collection to make more informed policy decisions and being able to utilize that data. However, we were concerned about whether the data was compulsory or voluntary, and then some of the data points that you just pointed out, whether that was the right kind of information to collect from both our applicants and our licensees, and that we could continue that conversation and express that in a letter, and then bring the discussion back to the May meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Sorick. Okay, so Mr. McGuire, would that be a precise enough motion?
I think so, and I think it probably would benefit everyone if we just kind of repeat it once with everything that Ms. Sorick stated. And I would add one small question that for you, the motioner, to consider. I think in this case, it would be a good idea for the board to also delegate the authority to Ms. Sorick and staff to work with the author's office going forward, just so she and her staff have the flexibility to kind of continue advocating for the board's overall position as the precise language of the bill may change. And then we don't have to come back to the board again for a different.
Okay. So delegate authority
to the executive officer and staff to work with the author's office to amend the language as appropriate, something along those lines. So I would just add that into the end of your motion.
Okay.
If that's clear enough. Otherwise, we can try. You can say your motion, and then I'll add that piece again, and then someone can say "so moved" if you wish.
Okay.
Or you can say the whole thing, whatever works.
Okay. I'm eager to move to do this and then move on to a board comment. So let me see if I get this right. Okay. So could we have a motion to delegate authority to the executive officer and staff to issue a letter indicating our support of the concept of collecting demographic data from licensees, but continue working with the author and sponsor to develop language so that we may reach a position of support.
So move. I second.
Thank you. It was moved by Dr. Tate and second by Dr. Kasuga. Any further board comment? Ms. Nystrom?
Good morning. So just for clarification purposes, I need to recuse myself on all of the items under agenda item number 5 and also for agenda item number 6.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Nystrom. Any other board comments? None?
Yes, I have a question. This is Dr. Rogers, Shakanda. I have a question on page 14 under reason for the bill. It's the last sentence in the first paragraph, where it talks about identifying the disparities, getting a greater sense of the workforce shortage needs. And then the last part, conducting more targeted outreach strategies. In speaking with the author and sponsor of the bill, did they talk about what those outreach strategies might look like?
Oh, that's a really good question, Dr. Rogers. We did not talk with specificity about that.
Okay.
From my recollection, there was some comments made about agencies in the state that might, or other entities in government that might do that. Ms. Sorick, do you recall?
I don't recall any discussion around outreach. No. I don't. Sorry.
That is a good question, though, Dr. Rogers. Maybe we can add that to our.
Okay, I was going to ask if that was something that you might be able to include in your follow-up discussions, just to get more clarification around that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Mr. Fu.
Thanks so much, Mr. Vantes. This is really a question for staff. I noted in the analysis that there was an impact to the ability in terms of capacity for staff, and it referenced the structural deficit and as well as the increase in application processing times. Ms. Sort, could you share a little bit more about the implications of this bill on board operations?
I can start, and then I would ask for Ms. Chung and Mr. Glassbeagle to also chime in on the impact. But I think because we are operating in a structural deficit, it's, I think, forcing more of an analysis and a discussion about cost of all legislation on our program. And any time the BREEZE system is changed, there is an added cost. And usually those costs, if they impact more than one board, are spread amongst the programs. But a cost as the cost, all the board members and staff are aware, we want to be mindful of that. Additionally, if there is added layers to the application or the renewal process, insofar as steps or information, that can garner additional phone calls or emails to the board staff, which takes away time spent on processing renewals or processing license applications. So these are all just operational concerns that we want to make sure we always identify when policy impacts the way we do business. And then I would defer to Mr. Glassbeagle or Ms. Chung if they would like to add additional information on that piece.
Good morning. This is Jason. I agree with everything Antoinette just said, and just to share that I am currently reaching out to entities throughout DCA, and I've been doing it since we had the meeting with the author's office to try to track down all the pieces of this. My assumption right now is there's 2 surveys that would be combined. We use one right now, and then there's a second one that I believe the Board of Registered Nursing uses, and I'm working to figure out how that second piece would factor into our current renewal process and what costs are associated with it and what time would be involved by licensees and then also staff. So that is the current outlier that would really help us understand any missing pieces staff time or cost from our program. Thank you.
I'm not sure if Ms. Chung has anything to add. I think the other question I had related to this was, are there any, in the past, I recall that any form changes have led to regulatory packages having to be started depending on the type of form needed or type of request asked. So, you know, I think of the brochures that we did through that process. So I'm curious just to hear from a process perspective if there's a regulatory package that needs to happen in terms of implementing language related to this bill that the board would need to undertake as it relates to AB 1236.
That is a good question, and since we have Mr. Jackson for one more meeting, I would ask him. The main, I think, concern we have with this bill in particular is in prior iterations of this bill, the data points have been voluntary, and that is how the current health survey is. Health profession survey that is currently on the BREEZE system. But if it becomes a compulsory form, then I would assume we would have to have a regulation which would give us the authority to have that particular form in the BREEZE system. And that's just a guess on my part, but I would defer to Mr. Jackson to confirm that that would in fact be the case if it was required that they submit all the particular data points that are laid out in the bill.
And hi, this is Clay Jackson. If you're going to have a form and it's going to be implemented, they're usually done by regulation, so you're correct. If there's a bill that would call for specific parts of an application and lay it out, you might be able to get away doing it without having a regulation, but it would depend ultimately on what's signed by the governor in September. Not really guessing today, but if you wanted to put something into a form, then the best way to do it would be do it by regulation, unless everything was laid out in the actual statute, therefore not calling for a regulation or not requiring a regulation.
That's really helpful, Mr. Jackson. I'm just asking these questions because I want to make sure that I understand, you know, should this bill be implemented, what the impact on the board in terms of when we would actually undertake some of these actions would be. And so it looks like if regulatory packages would be required, we're looking at, and of course, if this bill is passed, we're looking at a 5-year horizon for implementation. And so I raise that because I think as we think about other issues related to regulatory fees and structural deficits, that within the longer time horizon, there might be some interesting impacts on the board's operations. And I guess one final question I have is that this item, this letter of support and concept, the actual support of this bill would still come back to the full board for approval, that we're not delegating that authority to the executive officer. Is that correct? With the board motion language we have?
That would be my intention. Mr. McGuire, we're going to come back to the board, right? The way that it's phrased.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I had a little computer issue there. I think the way we phrased it was to continue working on the bill language toward the goal of finding language that the board can support. So it's a little ambiguous. So if the board wants to make it clear and amend the motion so that it has to come back, I think that's something it can certainly do. Our next meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, being in July. Is that right, Ms. Sorick? Let's see.
We'll be
yeah.
meeting next in May. So
Oh, May. Oh, I see.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah. So then that's should be, you know, plenty of time to have it come back. So yeah, let's. I would propose that the if it's the will of the board, that the motioner consider amending their motion as President Fu has suggested, just to make sure it's clear that this language will come back to the board for a final position at a subsequent meeting. Is that acceptable to the motioner?
Oh my gosh. I'm sorry. Who moved the motion? Was that Dr. Tate?
Correct.
And Kasuga second.
And I'm
Was
okay
it
with
correct?
it too.
Yeah, Tate, I'm fine with it too.
Okay.
So the motion is amended pursuant to President Fu's amendment to have this item come back to the board for final approval at a subsequent meeting.
Yes.
And I would just ask from a staff perspective that we be able to continue to work with the chair of the Legislative and Regulatory Committee on the language of the letter. And I don't know if that needs to be worked into the motion or
But from my understanding, that's part of the motion, but if someone else wants to further clarify that, that's their prerogative to do so as well.
Okay. Let's just make sure that we're all good with the motion. So the motion is to delegate authority to the executive officer and staff to work to issue a letter indicating the board's support of the concept of collecting demographic data from licensees, but continue working with the author and sponsor in developing language so that the board may consider a position of support at a later point. Does that capture it?
I believe so.
Okay. Okay, so we have our motion, and I see Dr. Kasuga.
Thank you, Chair Cervantes. I just wanted to add something that was part of previous discussions about this bill with regards our support of the concept, to just add that we are currently collecting some of this demographic information, but it's on a voluntary basis, and that data that we collected, we're not able to use it, right? Is that correct, Ms. Sorick? And that's the reason why we support it in concept, because we would like to have the ability to see the demographic information data that we collected and be able to use it for policy, to inform our policy making. I just wanted to kind of like bring that to the full board as part of the discussions that we've had previously.
And thank you, Dr. Kasuga. And from what I understand now from all the discussions we've had about this, is that the data we're collecting was as a result of AB 2102, also by Ting in 2014. And so what Mr. Glass-Steagall is looking into in terms of operations is how what is being proposed in this new legislation might combine or supersede that existing voluntary survey that is presented to renewal applicants right now. Is that right, Mr. Glass-Steagall?
That is correct.
So we do have some mechanics of this in process right now. And there's an opportunity, I think, in AB 1236 to clarify and move forward in a way that's more useful, more actionable for the whole of the state government to respond to workforce needs. Is there any other board comment? Can we, any staff comment? Can we open public comment?
Thank you. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. So if any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. All right, so Dr. Winkleman would like to make a comment. So Dr. Winkleman, you've been unmuted.
Hi, Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman again at the California Psychological Association. I wanted to let the board know that that CPA has taken an opposed position on this bill, and what the concerns are of our board and our members. We do appreciate the intent of fostering a diverse and robust workforce, but however, we feel that the proposed data collection in this bill is overly broad and includes information that's really not relevant, like job satisfaction and future work intentions. And in addition, our board is concerned about the potential for data breach. We understand that the data would be reported in the aggregate. However, we're aware of so many technology failings and breaches within health systems, private organizations, and government that that we are concerned about the collection of sensitive information like gender identity or race or ethnicity that that our psychologists might not want to have publicly available.
Thank you.
All right, this is a moderator and I don't see any further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's been closed.
Okay, so we have a motion by Dr. Tate and second by Dr. Kasuga, and the motion was to delegate authority to the executive officer and staff to issue a letter indicating our support of the concept of collecting demographic data from licensees, but continue working with the author and sponsor in developing language so that the board may consider a position of support at a later point. If there's no further board comment, can we call the roll?
Kasuga?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Fu?
Aye.
Harb Sheets?
Aye.
Nystrom recuse. Phillips?
Aye.
Rogers?
Aye.
Tate?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. The next item is item 5B3, SB 731 Durazo, Criminal Records Relief. This is on page 23 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera.
Yes, thank you. Among other things, this bill amends section 11105 of the Penal Code, which would prohibit the board from receiving conviction information for applicants to the board if their conviction was granted relief pursuant to sections 1203.4, 1203.4A, 1203.41, 1203.42, or 1203.49 of the Penal Code, so long as a period of 2 years has elapsed since the date the relief was granted and the applicant was not convicted of a new criminal offense. This bill would have a large impact on the Board of Psychology's licensing and enforcement programs, and it would hinder the board's ability to carry out its legislative mandate of consumer protection. Currently, the board completes an enforcement review for every applicant with a criminal history. It determines whether the crimes committed are substantially related to the duties of the licensure. This bill would significantly diminish the board's ability to make these determinations without access to the necessary conviction information. This bill is currently in the Senate Public Safety Committee and is set to be heard on April 6, 2021. Staff recommends the board oppose SB 731 as it would hinder the board's ability to fully evaluate an applicant for licensure.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. This bill was one of the two that we did not have a chance to review at the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee on the 19th. The board staff recommend an opposed position. Is there a motion to approve the staff recommendation to oppose SB 731?
This is Dr. Phillips, so moved.
Second.
I second.
Oops. I'm sorry, I didn't catch who was the second.
Harp Sheets.
Okay, it's been moved by Dr. Phillips and second by Dr. Harb Sheets to approve the staff recommendation to oppose SB 731. Is there any board comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Mr. Fu. I do have a question actually about this bill, and it's to Ms. Monterrubio. Ms. Monterrubio, could you help elucidate what specific incidences might be missed if this bill was to pass?
Sure. I think a concern for enforcement would be that we wouldn't receive arrest reports, which can sometimes allude to a bigger issue than what the arrest is actually for. An example of that would be a domestic violence arrest. Those usually are dropped, but some of these reports shows things such as substance abuse, cognitive issues. Other arrests that we've seen are for possession of child pornography, indecent exposure, stalking, possession of drugs, violating a restraining order. Those would hopefully still be available to us. I know we've received reports for those types of arrests in the past, and I think each report has the potential to reveal an issue outside of the offense that got the person arrested, which may be a huge concern for the board.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much, Ms. Monterrubio.
Thank you. Any other board comment? Being none, could we open up public comment?
Thank you. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. And if anyone would like to make a comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions.
I see none.
And this is a moderator. I see none as well. So shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's closed.
So we have a motion to approve the staff, a motion by Dr. Phillips, second by Dr. Harb Sheets, to approve the staff recommendation to oppose SB 731. If there is no further board comment, can we call the roll?
Okay, Kasuga?
Aye.
Cervantes?
Aye.
Fu?
Aye.
Harb Sheets?
Aye.
Nystrom is recused. Phillips?
Aye.
Rogers?
Aye.
Tate?
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. I just want to do a quick time check. We have one more item in five in this agenda, in item 5B of the agenda. I think we can go through this one relatively quickly, and then Mr. Fu, maybe a break? Or are we okay?
I think folks would really appreciate a break after we take up this last item.
Okay. Okay, let's do it. Item 5B4 is SB 772, Ochoa Vogue, Professions and Vocations, Citations of Minor Violations. This is page 46 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera.
Thank you. This bill would prohibit the assessment of an administrative fine for a minor violation and would specify that a violation should be considered minor if it meets specified conditions, including that the violation did not pose a serious health or safety threat, and there is no evidence that the violation was willful. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee voted to recommend the board take an oppose unless amendment position on SB 772. The bill is currently in the Business Professions and Economic Development Committee, and it is set to be heard on April 19, 2021. The Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee recommends the board take an oppose unless amended position on SB 772.
And unless, so I'm thinking of too many things at one time. Sorry about that. Is there a motion to approve the staff and committee recommendation to oppose SB 772 unless amended to remove the Board of Psychology
This is Dr. Harpsheets. I so move that we accept the staff position to oppose unless amended to exempt the Board of Psychology.
I'll second.
And so it's been moved by Dr. Harpsheets and second by Dr. Tate to approve the staff and committee recommendation to oppose SB 772 unless amended to remove the Board of Psychology. Okay, is there any board discussion? Okay, seeing none, could we open public comment?
Thank you. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. So if anyone would like to make a comment, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. This is a moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's closed.
Okay, so we have a motion by Dr. Harpsheet, second by Dr. Tate, to approve the staff and committee recommendation to oppose SB 772 unless amended to exclude, to remove the Board of Psychology. If there's no further board comment, can we call the roll?
Yes. Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harpsheets.
Aye.
Nystrom recused. Phillips.
Aye.
Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Fu? Should we take a break?
Thank you so much, Mr. Cervantes. Yes, the board will be in a short break. I would say we return at 5 minutes be appropriate, knowing that we probably won't come back exactly at 10:05? Let's just say 10:10. Let's just make an even 10:10 and give folks 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we are returning from our brief recess, and because we were gone for about 10 minutes, I am going to ask that Ms. Bertot just call the roll, just so that we can have assure that a quorum has been maintained.
Of course. Okay. Kasuga?
Here.
Cervantes?
Here.
Fu?
Here.
Sheets?
Here.
Nystrom?
Here.
Phillips?
Here.
Rogers?
Here.
Tate?
Here.
Thank you. Roll is complete.
Thank you so much. I am so impressed that we all came back at 10:10. This is great. I'm going to turn it over back to you, Ms. Cervantes, for the remainder of our legislative items. I believe it's 5C.
Thank you, Mr. Fu. So continuing with item 5C1, AB 32, Aguiar Curry, telehealth. This is page 53 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera?
Thank you. This bill would require the State Department of Healthcare Services to indefinitely continue the telehealth flexibilities in place during the COVID-19 pandemic state of emergency. This bill would require the department by January 2022 to convene an advisory group with a specified membership to provide input to the department on the development of a revised Medi-Cal telehealth policy that promotes specified principles. This bill would require the department by December 2024 to complete an evaluation to assess the benefits of telehealth in Medi-Cal, including an analysis of improved access for patients, changes in health quality outcomes and utilization, and best practices for patients for the right mix of in-person visits and telehealth. The bill would require the department to report its findings and recommendations from the evaluation to the appropriate policy and fiscal committees of the legislature no later than July 1st, 2025. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee voted to recommend the board take a support position on AB 32. It is currently in the Health Committee and it has not been set for hearing yet. The Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee recommends the board support AB 32.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Is there a motion to approve the committee recommendation to support AB 32?
So moved. This is Mr. Fu.
Thank you, Mr. Fu. Is there a second?
I second. This is
With that,
Shakonda.
Dr. Rogers, thank you.
Thank you.
So it's been moved by Mr. Fu and second by Dr. Rogers to approve the committee recommendation to support AB 32. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, could we open public comment?
Thank you. This is a moderator, and I'll go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. So if any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. All right, Dr. Winkleman would like to make a comment. So Dr. Winkleman, you've been unmuted.
Hi, so Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman, again, from California Psychological Association. I just wanted to mention that that CPA is in strong support of AB 32 to extend and maintain access to telehealth services. And this has been extremely important for psychologists around the state and their patients to have access to telehealth, and we appreciate the board's consideration of supporting this bill.
Thank you.
All right. This is a moderator. I see no further requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's closed.
I see no additional board comments, so why don't we go ahead and call the roll on the motion to support, on the motion to approve the committee recommendation to support AB 32, moved by Mr. Fu and second by Dr. Rogers. The roll.
Thank you. Sorry, the mute wasn't working there. Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Barb Sheets.
Aye.
Nystrom. Are you recused on this one?
I am. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Phillips.
Aye.
Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you. This is complete.
The motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Petro. Item 5C2 is AB 107 Solace, Department of Consumer Affairs Board Temporary Licenses, Military Spouses. This is page 62 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera.
Thank you. This bill would expand the requirement in Business and Professions Code Section 115.6, which relates to issuing temporary licenses for individuals married to or in a domestic partnership or other legal union with an active duty member of the Armed Forces of the United States who is assigned to a duty station in this state under official active duty military orders, to include, among others, the Board of Psychology. The bill would require a board to issue a temporary license within 30 days of receiving the required documentation. The bill would require a board to submit to the department for approval draft regulations necessary to administer these provisions by June 15, 2022. The bill would exempt from these provisions a board that has a process in place by which an out-of-state licensed applicant in good standing who is married to or in a domestic partnership or other legal union with an active duty member of the Armed Forces of the United States is able to receive expedited temporary authorization to practice while meeting state-specified requirements for a period of at least 1 year. Under BPC 2946, the Board of Psychology allows a psychologist certified or licensed in another state or province and who has submitted an application to the board for a license in this state to perform activities and services of a psychological nature without a valid license for a period not to exceed 180 calendar days from the time of submitting his or her application or from the commencement of residency in this state, whichever occurs first. Staff spoke with the author's office and sponsor, who advised they are willing to assist the board in making the necessary modifications to BPC 2946 to include the board under the exemption above. Amendments to BPC 2946 can be found at the end of the analysis. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee voted to recommend the board take a supportive amended position on AB 107. On March 23, 2021, the Assembly Committee on Business and Professions voted 17-0 to refer the bill to the Committee on Military and Veterans Affairs. The location of the bill is currently in the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee and has not been set for hearing yet. The Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee recommends the board take a supportive amended position on AB 107 and provide the author's office with the identified amendments to the Business and Professions Code 2946.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rivera. So is there a motion to approve the committee recommendation to support AB 107 if amended to include the language, the language of the recommendation is on page 69. Let me see if I get this right. Is there? So let me back up here. Motion to approve the committee recommendation to support AB 107 if amended.
So moved, Mr. Cervantes. And I think you're referencing attachment C, which is the has the bill text, I believe. Excuse me, page 66 and 67, which has that language.
I'll second that.
Okay. I have
69, sorry, page 69 with the amendment language.
Okay. Thank you. That was cleaner. So it's been moved by Mr. Fu and second by Dr. Tate to approve the committee recommendation to support AB 107 if amended with the language on page 69 of our hand carry package. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, could we open public comment?
Thank you. This is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. Anyone who would like to make a public comment, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. All right, I see no request for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's closed.
Seeing no further board comment, the motion is to approve the committee, moved by Mr. Fu, second by Dr. Tate, to approve the committee recommendation to support AB 107 if amended using the language in page 69 of our hand carry board packet. Can we call the roll?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Hardsheets.
Aye.
Nystrom recused. Phillips.
Aye.
Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item 5C3, AB 225 Gray, Department of Consumer Affairs Boards, Veterans, Military Spouses Licenses. This is page 90 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera.
Thank you. Existing law requires specified boards within the department to issue, after appropriate investigation, certain types of temporary licenses to an applicant if the applicant meets specified requirements, including that the applicant supplies evidence satisfactory to the board that the applicant is married to or in a domestic partnership or other legal union with an active duty member of the Armed Forces of the United States who is assigned to an active duty station in this state under official active duty military orders, and the applicant holds a current, active, and unrestricted license that confers upon the applicant the authority to practice in another state, district, or territory of the United States, the profession or vocation for which the applicant seeks a temporary license from the board. Existing law requires these temporary licenses to expire 12 months after issuance. Under existing law, some of the funds within the jurisdiction of a board consist of revenue from fees that are continuously appropriated. This bill would require the temporary licenses described above to expire 30 months after issuance. This bill would require boards not responsible for the licensure and regulation of healing arts licensees and not subject to the temporary licensing provisions described above to issue licenses to an applicant if the applicant meets specified requirements, including that the applicant supplies evidence satisfactory to the board that the applicant is an honorably discharged veteran of the Armed Forces of the United States, or is married to or in a domestic partnership or other legal union with an active duty member of the Armed Forces of the United States, as provided. The bill would require an application for a license to include a signed affidavit attesting to the fact that the applicant meets all requirements for a license. The bill would authorize the immediate termination of a license issued pursuant to these provisions upon a finding that the license holder failed to meet specified requirements or provided substantively inaccurate information that would affect the person's eligibility for licensure as provided. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee agreed with the staff recommendation to watch AB 225. The bill is currently in the Assembly Business and Professions Committee and has not been set for hearing. Actually, wait, I changed that. It is set for hearing on April 6, 2021.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Since the recommendation was for watch, there is no there's no need for a motion on this item. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, could we open public comment?
Thank you. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel is now available. We are displaying instructions for your reference. This is a moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Would you like me to close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's closed.
And I see no further board comments, so we'll move on to item 5B4. This is AB 339 Lee, State and Local Government Open Meetings. This is page 95 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera.
Thank you. This bill would require all meetings, including gatherings using teleconference technology, to include an opportunity for all persons to attend via a call-in option or an internet-based service option that provides closed captioning services and requires both a call-in and an internet-based service option to be provided to the public. This bill would require all meetings to provide the public with an opportunity to comment on proposed legislation as provided, and requires translation services to be provided for the 10 most spoken languages other than English in California, and would require those persons commenting in a language other than English to have double the amount of time as those giving a comment in English, if time restrictions on public comment are utilized except as specified. The bill would require instructions on how to attend the meeting to be posted at the time notice of the meeting is publicized. The bill will require all meetings to include an opportunity for all persons to attend via a call-in option. The bill would require, even in the case of a declared state or local emergency, teleconference meetings to include an in-person public comment opportunity. Let's see. The bill would also require the legislative bodies of the local agency to employ a sufficient amount of qualified bilingual persons to provide translation during the meeting in a language of a non-English speaking person in jurisdictions which govern a substantial number of non-English speaking people. The bill would require instructions on how to attend the meeting via call-in or internet-based service to be posted online along with the meeting agenda in an easily accessible location at least 72 hours before all regular meetings and at least 24 hours before all special meetings. The bill would require all meetings to provide the public with an opportunity to address a legislative body remotely via call-in or internet-based service, and would require those persons commenting in a language other than English to have double the amount of time as those giving a comment in English. The bill would require legislative bodies of local agencies and state bodies as defined to translate agendas and instructions for accessing the meeting to be translated into all languages for which 5% of the population in the area governed by the local agency or state body's jurisdiction are speakers. By imposing new duties on local governments with respect to meetings, this bill would impose a state-mandated local program. The bill would provide that no reimbursement is required by this act for a specified reason. Staff has learned that the author's office has submitted amendments to remove the bag leaking portion of this bill, so it will no longer affect state boards and commissions. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee agreed with the staff recommendation to watch AB 339. The bill is currently pending referral. Staff recommends the board watch AB 339 as the author has submitted amendments to remove the bag leaking portion of this bill. We are monitoring this bill to make sure that amendments are submitted and made to the language.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. There's no motion needed for this watch recommendation. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, could we open public comment?
Thank you. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. This is a moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Thank you. Seeing no further public comment on item 5C4, we'll move on to 5C5. AB 562 low, mental health services for healthcare providers. This is page 107, or begins at page 107 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera.
Thank you. This bill would require the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs to establish a mental health resiliency program to provide mental health services to licensed healthcare providers who provide or have provided healthcare services to COVID-19 patients. This bill would require the relevant healing arts boards to notify licensees and solicit applications for access to the mental health resiliency program immediately upon the availability of services. The bill would require an applicant to make an attestation that states, among other things, that the applicant is an eligible licensee. The bill would make an applicant who willfully makes a false statement in their attestation guilty of a misdemeanor. This bill would exempt the records associated with the Mental Health Resiliency Program from disclosure pursuant to the California Public Records Act. The bill is currently in the Assembly Committee on Business and Professions. It came from the committee chair with authors' amendments and re-referred to the Committee on Business and Professions, but has not been set for hearing. Staff recommends the board watch AB 562.
Thank you. This was the second bill that I mentioned earlier. We did not review in the Leg and Regulatory Affairs Committee because of timing. The staff recommends watch, so there isn't a motion needed. But I do want to see if there's any further staff comment on this, Ms. Sorick.
Hi, yes, we are monitoring this bill, and it's actually going to be set for hearing on April 6th, and that was an update that was just recently made, and it will be heard in Assembly Business and Professions Committee. I think there are still several details of this bill to be worked out, and board staff is in communication with both the author's office on the details of this bill, as well as the Department of Consumer Affairs. So I just wanted to give everyone the heads up that we should have more information to provide the board about this bill at our May meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Sorick. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, could we open up public comment?
All right, I will open up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public would like to make a comment, we are displaying instructions. This is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Okay, seeing no further public comment, we'll move on to item 5C6, AB 646 low, Department of Consumer Affairs Board's expunged convictions. This begins on page 113 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera?
Thank you. This bill would require a board within the department that has posted on its internet website that a person's license was revoked because the person was convicted of a crime within 90 days of receiving an expungement order for the underlying offense from the person. If the person reapplies for a licensure or is relicensed, to post notification of the expungement order and the date thereof on the board's internet website. The bill would require the board, on receiving an expungement order, if the person is not currently licensed and does not reapply for licensure, to remove within the same period of initial posting on its internet website that the person's license was revoked and information previously posted regarding arrest, charges, and convictions. This bill would require a person in either case to pay a $50 fee to the board unless another amount is determined by the board to be necessary to cover the cost of administering the bill's provisions. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee agreed with the staff recommendation to watch AB 646. On March 23, 2021, the Assembly Business and Professions Committee voted 17-0 to refer the bill to the Appropriations Committee. It is currently in the Appropriations Committee awaiting a hearing date. Staff recommends the board watch AB 646.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Is there any board comment on this watch recommendation? Seeing none, could we open public comment?
Thank you. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. This is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Thank you. Seeing no additional board comments, we'll move on to item 5C7, AB 657 BONTA, State Civil Service System, Personal Service Contracts, Professionals. This is page 121 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera.
Thank you. This bill would prohibit a state agency from entering into a contract with a professional for a period of more than 365 consecutive days or for a period of 365 non-consecutive days in a 24-month period. The bill would define professional for these provisions to include, among others, a physician and surgeon, dentist, and a clinical psychologist. The bill would require each state agency that has a contract with a professional pursuant to these provisions to prepare a monthly report to the exclusive bargaining representative for the professional. If the professional is represented, providing certain information, including the name and contact information of the professional subject to a contract with the state agency, the details of the contract period for each professional, and the number of open professional positions available. This bill would also require a state agency that uses a personal services contract for an employee position for each state agency that has a budgetary allocation to provide the applicable employee organization that represents employees who provide the same or similar services with certain information, including, among other things, the expenditures for recruiting and advertising to fill positions for which contractors are hired, and the number of applications for personal services received in the most recent quarter of the fiscal year. On March 19, 2021, staff received notice from the author's office that they will be submitting an amendment to remove programs under the Department of Consumer Affairs from this requirement. It is currently in the Committee on Public Employment and Retirement, but has not been set for committee. The Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee recommends the board oppose unless amended AB 657. The requested amendment is to exclude the Board of Psychology from the bill's provisions, as the requirements could negatively impact contracts for translation services, enforcement experts, psychological evaluations, and examination services.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Is there a motion to oppose AB 657 unless amended to exclude the Board of Psychology from the bill's provisions?
Madam Chair, this isn't a motion. This is Mr. Fu. This isn't a motion. I'm actually curious to hear if it's possible that we actually not oppose the bill unless amended, but actually just keep it on watch and delegate authority to the chair of the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee and the executive officer to issue an opposed letter unless amended if the amendments aren't taken. I think it's just to reflect the fact that the author's staff did commit to removing programs under DCA on March 19th, and want to give an opportunity for that to occur.
Okay, so okay, I think I'm going to need help with phrasing this here. So the motion, because could we maybe Mr. McGuire can help me. If we have a motion to oppose unless amended, could we add that that we hold? Oh gosh, what am I thinking? I'm thinking of too many things.
Madam Chair, there's no motion on the table currently, so what I'm suggesting that instead of making a motion, and there isn't one currently, is that, and I'm happy to do so, I just want to make sure I get the pulse of you as the chair and the committee members, that instead of making the motion to oppose unless amended, that we maintain the bill on watch, but we also delegate to you and the executive officer the authority to oppose the bill unless amended should the author's office not end up doing what they said they would do on March 19th. So that's, I think it's really, but before we get to the motion question, I think it's a question to you and your committee members and staff if that's a position that's comfortable for us, just given the dynamics that the author is no longer going to be the author of this bill, and that the staff has also committed to remove DCA programs from the bill.
It is to me. I think there are some occasions where we need to be more active in our advocacy, and and help get to better legislative solutions. And I think what you're suggesting aligns with that. So I want to create an opportunity for Dr. Phillips or Dr. Kasuga to chime in if they have any concerns with that idea.
I don't have any concerns with that idea, but I do think we should make a motion, because if we're delegating anything to staff, it's still going to require the motion. So maybe Mr. Fu could propose a motion. I don't think there's any problem with the sentiment he's expressed.
I'm happy to move that we delegate to the executive officer and to the chair of the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee to issue and oppose unless amended letter regarding AB 657 if the author's office does not fulfill their commitment on March 19, 2021 to move programs under the Department of Consumer Affairs from the requirements of the bill.
I'll second that.
And the second was from Dr. Tate?
Yes.
Okay, so it's been moved by Mr. Fu and second by Dr. Tate that we that we delegate authority to our executive officer to issue a letter to maintain a watch position on AB 657. And issue a letter to oppose unless it is amended to exclude the Board of Psychology from the bill's provisions. Is that our motion?
The executive officer as well as yourself.
Oh, and myself. Okay. So the motion is to delegate authority to the executive officer and the chair of the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee to issue to sustain the watch position for AB 657 unless it is to sustain a watch position for AB 657 or if it is not amended to issue a letter, if it is not amended to exclude the Board of Psychology to issue a letter with a position of oppose unless it's amended. I kind of butchered that, but did I catch the motion?
Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Fu and Dr. Tate. Is there any further board comment on this motion? Seeing none, could we open public comment?
All right, this is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. This is the moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's closed.
So we have a motion on the floor, and it was moved by Mr. Fu and second by Dr. Tate. So the motion is to delegate to the executive officer and chair to sustain AB 657 on watch, or issue a letter of oppose unless amended to exclude the Board of Psychology. If there's no further board comment, could we call the roll?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Cervantes.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harp Sheets.
Aye.
Nystrom. Oh, recused. Phillips.
Aye.
Rogers.
Aye.
Tate.
Aye.
Vote complete.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Fu, for being thoughtful about workflow. Sometimes our timelines don't align, but we should consider how things, timing, so that we're working as effectively as possible. I appreciate that. Thank you. Item 5C8 is AB 810 Flora, Healing Arts Reports Claims Against Licensees. This begins on page 125 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera?
Thank you. Existing law makes failure of a licensee of the Medical Board of California, the Pediatric Medical Board of California, the Board of Psychology, the Dental Board of California, the Dental Hygiene Board of California, the Osteopathic Medical Board of California, the State Board of Chiropractic Examiners, the Board of Registered Nursing, the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians of the State of California, the State Board of Optometry, the Veterinary Medical Board, the Board of Behavioral Sciences, the Physical Therapy Board of California, the California State Board of Pharmacy, the Speech Language Pathology and Audiology and Hearing Aid Dispensers Board, the California Board of Occupational Therapy, the Acupuncture Board, or the Physician Assistant Board, a claimant or their counsel to report a settlement, judgment, or arbitration award over $3,000 of a claim or action for damages for death or personal injury caused by negligence, error, or omission in practice, or by the unauthorized rendering of professional services by a person who holds a license, certificate, or other similar authority from one of those boards who does not possess professional liability insurance as to the claim within 30 days to the agency that issued the license, certificate, or specified authority, punishable by a fine of not less than 50 or more than 500 as specified. The existing law, this bill would increase the minimum fine for a violation of that provision to $100. Existing law makes failure of a marriage and family therapist, clinical social worker, professional clinical counselor, a claimant, or their counsel to report a settlement, a judgment, or arbitration award over $10,000 of a claim or action for damages for death or personal injury caused by negligence, error, or omission in practice, or by the unauthorized rendering of professional services by a marriage and family therapist, a clinical social worker, or a professional clinical counselor who does not possess professional liability insurance as to that claim within 30 days to the agency that has issued the license, certificate, or similar authority, punishable by a fine of not less than $50 or nor more than $500 as specified. The bill would increase the minimum fine for a violation of that provision to $100. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee agreed with the staff recommendation to watch AB 10. The bill is currently in the Business and Professions Committee. Board staff recommends the board watch AB 810.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. So there's no motion needed for a watch recommendation. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, could we open public comment?
Thank you. This is the moderator, and I have opened up the Q&A panel. If anyone would like to make a comment, they can type, "I would like to make a comment," and submit it to all panelists. And I apologize. It looks like I missed Dr. Winkleman from the last time, so I'm going to unmute her now. And Dr. Winkleman, you've been unmuted.
Oh, there's no need to make a comment at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry about that, Miss Dr. Winkleman. I didn't see it either.
All right, this is a moderator, and I double checked, and I see no further requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's been closed.
Okay. Thank you. I see no further board comments, so we can move to the next item, which is 5C9, AB 830, Flora, Department of Consumer Affairs, Director, Powers and Duties. And this one begins on page 129.
Thank you. This bill has actually been amended since we last met and now applies to vacancies. It would require the director to notify the appropriate policy committees of the legislature within 60 days after the position of chief or executive officer of any bureau or board within the department becomes vacant. So that is what it's going to do now. I would assume staff recommends a watch position. Antoinette, Jason, would you like to add anything to that?
I would agree.
I agree.
Okay. So thank you. So we had a watch recommendation before the bill was amended, and we've just been briefed on what those amendments are. And there's still a staff recommendation for watch on this. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, let's open public comment.
All right. The Q&A panel is now available. If anyone would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. All right, I see no request for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Thank you. I see no further comment on 5C9, so we'll move on to 5C10, AB 1026, Smith, Business Licenses, Veterans. This begins on page 131 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera?
Thank you. This bill would require the department and any board within the department to grant a 50% fee reduction for an initial license to an applicant who provides satisfactory evidence that the applicant has served as an active duty member of the United States Armed Forces or the California National Guard and was honorably discharged. This bill would authorize the board to adopt regulations necessary to administer these provisions. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee agreed with the staff recommendation to watch AB 26. It was referred to the Committee on Business and Professions and is awaiting hearing. Staff recommends the board watch AB 1026.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, could we open public comment?
Thank you. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. All right, it's now available, and if anyone would like to make a comment, they can type "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. All right, I see no request for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
So moving on to item 5C11, AB 1386, Cunningham, license fees, military partners and spouses. This begins on page 133 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera?
Thank you. Existing law provides for the licensure and regulation of various professions and vocations by boards within the Department of Consumer Affairs. Existing law requires the board to expedite the licensure process for an applicant who holds a current license in another jurisdiction in the same profession or vocation and provides evidence that they are married to or in a domestic partnership or other legal union with an active duty member of the Armed Forces of the United States who is assigned to a duty station in this state under official active duty military orders. This bill would prohibit a board from changing an initial or original license fee to an applicant who meets these expedited licensing requirements. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee agreed with the staff recommendation to watch AB 1386. The bill was referred to the Committee on Business and Professions on March 11th and is currently awaiting hearing. Staff recommends the board watch AB 1386.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, could we open up public comment?
This is the moderator, and I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. So if anyone would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. This is the moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Item, seeing no further board comment, we'll move on to item 5C12, SB 102 Melendez, COVID-19 emergency order violation license revocation. This begins on page 135 of the hand carry package.
Thank you.
Rivera?
This bill would prohibit a board within the Department of Consumer Affairs that does not regulate healing arts licenses and the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control from revoking a license or imposing a fine or penalty for failure to comply with any COVID-19 state of emergency orders or COVID-19 stay-at-home orders unless the board or department can prove that lack of compliance resulted in transmission of COVID-19. The bill would specify that the provisions do not preclude issuance of fines, penalties, or revoking a license for any action that is not related to the issuance of any COVID-19 state of emergency orders for COVID-19 state of at-home order. The provisions of this bill would remain in effect until either the COVID-19 state of emergency is terminated or all COVID-19 stay-at-home orders are no longer in effect, whichever occurs later. But in no case would the provisions remain in effect after January 1st, 2024. This bill would declare that it is to take effect immediately as an urgency statute. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee agreed with the staff recommendation to watch SB 102. The bill is in the Senate Committee on Business, Professions, and Economic Development and is set for hearing on April 5th, 2021. Staff recommends the board watch SB 102.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, could we open public comment?
Thank you. This is the moderator, and the Q&A panel is now available. If anyone would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. This is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Seeing no further board comment, we'll move on to item 5C13, SB 224, Portantino, Pupil Instruction, Mental Health Education. This begins on page 144 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera?
Thank you. This bill would require each school district, county office of education, state special school, and charter school to ensure that all pupils in grades 1 to 12 inclusive receive medically accurate, age-appropriate mental health education from instructors trained in the appropriate courses at least once in elementary school, at least once in junior high school or middle school as applicable, and at least once in high school. The bill would require that instruction to include, among other things, reasonably designed instruction on the overarching themes and core principles of mental health. The bill would require that instruction and related materials to, among other things, be age appropriate for use in pupils of all races, genders, sexual orientations, and ethnic and cultural backgrounds, pupils with disabilities, and English learners. By imposing additional requirements on local education agencies, the bill would impose a state mandated local program. This bill would provide that if the Commission on State Mandates determines that the bill contains costs mandated by the state, reimbursement for those costs shall be made pursuant to the statutory provisions noted above. On March 19, 2021, the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee agreed with the staff recommendation to watch SB 2022. This bill is currently in the Appropriations Committee set for hearing on April 5th, 2021. Staff recommends the board watch SB 224.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Is there any board comment? Seeing none, could we open public comment?
Thank you. I've opened up the Q&A panel and we are displaying instructions. All right, I see no request for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's been closed.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no board comment, we'll move on to item 5C14 SB 534. Joan, Department of Consumer Affairs. This begins on page 154 of the hand carry package. Ms. Rivera?
Thank you. On March 4th, 2021, this bill was amended from a spot bill related to the Department of Consumer Affairs to a bill related solely to dental hygienists. Due to this change, staff will no longer watch SB 534. It is currently in this Business and Professions and Economic Development Committee. And as mentioned previously, due to the amendments on March 4th, 2021, staff will no longer watch SB 534.
Thank you, Ms. Rivera. Seeing no board comment on this item, could we open public comment?
Thank you. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. All right, the Q&A panel is now available. If anyone would like to make a public comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" and submit it to all panelists using the Q&A panel. All right, I see no request for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Thank you. So moving on to item 5D. This item is update of California Psychological Association legislative proposal regarding new registration category for psychological testing technicians. This item is a carryover from our legislative and regulatory affairs agenda. The CPA informed us, however, that there isn't any update at this time. So, Mr. McGuire, do we need to open public comment for this?
Yes, please.
Okay, can we open public comment, please?
Sure.
We are on
The
item
Q&A.
5D.
Thank you. The Q&A panel is now available. If anyone would like to comment on this item, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. This is the moderator. I see no requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Okay, and moving on to item 5E. This is legislative items for future meetings. The board may discuss items of legislation in sufficient detail to determine whether such items should be on a future board meeting agenda and or whether to hold a special meeting of the board to discuss such items pursuant to Government Code Section 11125.4. Are there any board comments? For future items?
Ms. Cervantes?
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify my earlier recommendation to watch a bill, and is that for our committee or I was just wondering if that's something that I have to raise again today, or if that's being looked into by staff?
You know, that's a good question. I think during this period, because our meetings were close together, and the requirement to agendize items ahead of time, we're just kind of having some overlap. But could you tell us a little bit about what you raised during our Ledge and Regulatory Affairs Committee? Because that would be where we would review it first.
Okay. So this is just for a point of clarification, and I understand that the time frame between our committee meeting and the current meeting, the board meeting, is too close together. But I would recommend that that we look into SB 221 within the committee, which is by Senator Weiner on healthcare coverage. And it's for timely access to care for mental health. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kasuga. Any other items from board members?
This is Mr. Fu. What I'm going to recommend is that Dr. Kasuga's item be referred back to the Legislative and Regulatory Affairs Committee and not be on the agenda. So have it be such the case where she and you and Dr. Phillips as the three members of this committee have the opportunity to dive more deeply onto that item.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Fu. And there is, seeing no further board comment, we'll go ahead and open public comment.
All right. The Q&A panel is now available. If anyone would like to make a public comment, please type, "I would like to make a comment," and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. This is the moderator. I see no request for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
All right. Well, I just, before concluding item number 5 on today's agenda, I just want to thank Mr. Glass-Steagall, Ms. Rivera, Ms. Sorick, and Mr. McGuire for all of their staff time to prepare this report and our first Ledge and Regulatory Affairs Committee meeting on the 19th. It was, I appreciate that it was a heavy load in a short period of time, and appreciate the care in preparing all of these documents. This concludes item 5 of today's agenda, Mr. Fu.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking us through all those bills and for the care which you and Dr. Kasuga and Phillips have provided and guidance in terms of all the bills reviewed. Really appreciate it. So with that, we are going to take up item 6, and what I'm going to propose is that we work through as much of item 6 as possible until about noon, at which point we will then recess for a 30-minute lunch. So we'll work through the next 50 minutes or so, 50 minutes or so on item 6, and we'll go from there and take the lunch recess at noon. So I will turn this over to, actually, I will keep this and turn it over to our packet for item 6 and ask Ms. Sorick for an overview.
If I could just have 1 minute to pull up a document, and then I will go ahead and get started.
No worries, and I should mention that this is related to our Sunset Review Committee paper. So on March 3rd, 2021, Dr. Phillips and I, as well as Executive Officer Sorek, presented to the Sunset Committee remotely, and we were able to field questions from committee members about the board. We were also asked to submit and prepare responses to about 25 identified issues. And these are the issues that are listed here in our background paper that you have before you, starting on page 8 of 67 in the board meeting materials. The one thing I'll caveat is that the actual board responses don't actually start until page, let's see, page 25 of the PDF. Anything prior to page 25 of the PDF was, excuse me, yes, page 25 of the PDF, it was the committee language. So what we're gonna ask here, thank you, Mr. Glass-Beagle, for pulling this up. So what we're gonna ask, we're gonna review each item, present the issue that the Sunset committees would like us to explore. The board's draft response is included on that item, and then we'll talk through each response. At the conclusion of working through all these responses, we will then consider and entertain approval of this document to be submitted to the committee. Ms. Sorek, did I fill the air enough to pull this up?
Yes. I just wanted to add just a brief timeline of the sunset process, and this may sound familiar to some of the board members, but the board submitted its background paper to the Business and Professions committees in November of 2019. In November of 2020, the board updated the background paper and submitted the COVID supplemental document. In February of 2021, the board was notified that we were going to be scheduled for a sunset hearing in March of 2021, and the board was sent a draft of identified issues and background. This is the document that you are ultimately looking at right now. In March of 2021, the hearing was held, and the board received the final identified issues background document from the committee staff. The board will review the draft responses from staff today and provide any edits or feedback, which will ultimately be submitted to the committee staff for consideration. Once that document is reviewed, the legislation will be introduced to extend the sunset of the board. This is typically for a 4-year time period, and also include any additional statutory provisions that we have requested as part of the November 2019 and November 2020 documents. And we have included today in the document an addendum which includes all the statutory provisions that we have asked the committee to consider. And this started back in a couple of years ago when we were originally scheduled for sunset. So just to provide some context to the discussion today, and again, these are the 21 issues that the Business and Professions Committee staff identified. Some of them are areas that the board has identified as issues it would like to address, and some of the issues are those in which the committee consultants and the committee have identified as issues for the board to address.
Are there any questions from the board about board process or what we're about to embark upon, or any comments from Dr. Phillips as the co-pilot on the Sunset Committee?
I don't have any comments other than we just need to work through the language.
With that order, let's dive in. So what I'm going to do is ask that staff present each issue and then pull up the board response, and then invite board members to provide feedback.
Would you like for staff to read the issue, and then the board may then discuss the draft response if there are changes or additions to the draft?
That would be great. Thanks so much, Ms. Sorick.
Okay. If I can ask Mr. Glassbeagle. Okay, so we have that pulled up, and it's the highlighted issue number 1. The board is experiencing a budget structural deficit, which will necessitate fee increases in the future. What options should the board consider in order to stabilize its fund condition? Apologies, that is the issue, but the staff recommendation is the board should describe its budget resource needs, provide additional details on the administrative solutions it is considering to improve its fund condition, and to report to the committees on any fee increases it plans to enact.
So are there initial comments to the draft board response provided here? Ms. Cervantes, then Dr. Phillips.
I just, I have a question. Here on the response, we said that we'd like to request the committee's assistance by establishing a file transfer fee of $10 to recoup the cost of retrieving and returning the appropriate documents from the state's record center. And I guess my question really is that enough? Is that enough of a cost of recovering for this administrative process? Then the reason why I'm asking this is because I want to be thoughtful if we're going to be if we are limited in our opportunities to increase the whole of our fees. I want to create enough room for us to actually recover within our fees structure, recover costs, like the whole of costs. So,
Mr. Fu, would you like me to just provide a brief response, and then I see Dr. Phillips had his hand up as well. I think as far as process goes, our first step was identifying that we have a structural imbalance, and that we will need to consider fee increases. First step to that process is looking at how we can increase our regulatory fees to the statutory cap that is provided in law. This second step would be that we would do a fee study and identify where statutory caps need to be increased. This was a cost that we have been paying for. We don't charge any fees for this. So this was just a matter of what can we very cleanly ask for statutory authority without perhaps a full fee study that would just allow us to recoup the costs that we're paying out of pocket. So in order to request the file, it's $5. To get the file back, it's another $5. It's a very small amount, but it felt like something that was achievable if we can make that quick fix now in sunset. And we have the justification, which is that's what we're paying. So we're literally just trying to recoup the cost of what we're paying for that service. And then ultimately, when we get to the point of doing the fee study, we can look at all of our charges and how much we pay for several processes, not just this one. I don't know if
Okay.
that helps.
Yeah, that clarifies for me. Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Phillips?
I forgot I was on mute. I just have one comment on the text here. It's the final sentence of the text. It says the board's utmost goal in increasing fees is to remain fiscally solvent. I think utmost is a difficult word under the circumstances, so I would just change that to ultimate. That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Are there additional board comments? Okay, so I think what I'm going to do here is we are going to turn it to manage the conversation flow. Each time we go through an item, we'll flip it to public comment. So we're going to turn it over to Madam Moderator to open the public comment for item 1.
Thank you. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel. And let me make my co-moderator the presenter so she can display the instructions. All right. So the Q&A panel has been opened, and if anyone would like to make a comment, they can type, "I would like to make a comment," using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists.
All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. And
thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Board members, not seeing any further comment on item 1. And with the changes by Dr. Phillips, we will then move to item number 2. And then what we'll do is after review of all these items, we'll then take the entire board motion on this item. So item 2, would staff provide the staff recommendation as it relates to the issue, and then we can discuss the board response.
Okay, so going down to issue 2, staff recommendation, the board should discuss its activities responding to the COVID-19 global pandemic, its experience with the existing waiver process, and its request for independent authority to waive the psychology licensing law during a state of emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Sorek. Ms. Cervantes, you're unmuted. Did you want to speak on this item?
Yes. In the response, I did not see a statement about continuing care during an emergency. And that has been part of our discussion since we first discussed this in the ad hoc emergency response committee. And I guess I don't have a specific language recommendation, but maybe a staff question. Would adding that type of phrasing be helpful to strengthen the argument here?
I'm just throwing this out as a possibility, but on the sentence in the second paragraph, it states, in order to be responsive to the board's stakeholders, it is seeking statutory authority to be able to address on its own any statutory regulatory barriers impacting the practice of psychology. Would you like to add and continued access to care? Would that address your concern?
Yeah, because I think that's that's been important in our discussion. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Dr. Phillips?
Yeah, I had just a grammatical change again with respect to the text. Let me just get back to it. It's in the very last paragraph of our response. It's the third line from the bottom. I'll read from the beginning of that sentence, actually. At the recommendation of the Emergency Preparedness Ad Hoc Committee, the board is requesting to have independent authority to waive specified provisions of the psychology licensing laws during a declared federal, state, or local emergency. I think it would read cleaner if it said the board is requesting independent authority. I don't think we have to say you have. I don't think that adds anything to it. That's it.
Thanks, Dr. Phillips. So staff is making the requested change in real time. And I'm not seeing any further board discussion, so we'll flip it over to public comment on this item.
Sorry, this is Jason. Can Dr. Phillips just clarify where the amendment is to be made in? It's on the area I'm in, right?
I can't see what you're in because it's so tiny on my screen. I don't have any idea. It's at the very end of the response. So starts on the third line from the bottom of the response. And the language starts with in the middle of the sentence or a little past the middle of the sentence. The board is requesting to have independent authority. Should be the board is requesting independent authority.
Dr. Phillips, it's not in the response. It's actually in the background section.
Oh my God. Well, never mind. Oh, okay. Well, then I've got lots of comments on the response.
Oh, okay. That was the background. Okay.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification. Okay. So thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. I've got a lot of comments on this response, actually. So it starts with upon issuance of the state's declared emergency. Ms. Sork, is that the correct word, issuance?
I believe so.
Okay, but it's not speaking California government. I will take your word for it. Going further down, it says, for example, the board issued a waiver of the face-to-face supervision requirements and live requirement for continuing education for the purposes of license renewal. This is about the fifth line. And I think we should do a little bit more explanation here to say something like, to allow for the utilization of synchronous video platforms in an effort to promote health and public safety. So I think we should really explain what the waiver was, what we were looking for, or what we're trying to accomplish by our waivers. So at the end of the sentence where it stops license renewal, it would say, the sentence would continue to allow utilization or to allow for utilization of synchronous video platforms in an effort to promote health and public safety.
And Mr. Glassbeagle, as this is real-time editing, I don't think we'll need to use the underline feature. So if you want to just go ahead and make the changes as the board members insert those, that would be fine.
Okay. The following sentence.
Sorry, real quick. I was just going to suggest, actually, if you turn on the track changes feature, it will do both, so you don't have to worry about going back and underlining, and folks can see the changes being made. So if that's helpful to do track changes, that might sort of save time and also show both. All right, Dr. Phillips, back to your editings.
Okay. The following sentence says, once the department established a waiver request process, the board initiated several requests, including extended time limitations on training and additional time to take the examinations and complete continuing education renewal requirements. I guess extended time limitations refers to also completing continuing education, but it feels a little confusing to me. And what I said was, instead of and complete, put in the following domains, colon. That doesn't make sense, though. No, that doesn't make sense. Hang on for a second. I just think it's what is confusing me is it says extended time limitations on training categories and additional time to take the examinations and complete continuing education, but it's not clear that the extended time limitations from the prior clause applies to completing continuing education.
Dr. Phillips, this is Jason. We can add in and extended time to complete continuing education.
I think that'd be great. You guys are going to be so sick of me by the end of this document. Okay. Following sentence. Additionally, the board identified existing statutory authority to waive its own, this is where the following domains come in, to waive its own regulations around the following areas. Actually, I think is colloquially correct, but I don't think it reads very well. So I would say instead of around the following areas, in the following domains, colon. I think that should be a colon, not a semicolon. Okay, so it goes through all the different lists of things. I'm trying to see where this sentence begins. And okay, and the final clause is of that paragraph, and removal of the law and ethics examination requirement for psychologists whose California license had been canceled and has requested a reinstatement through the DCA reinstatement. It just seems like an awkward word, had been canceled and have requested, as opposed to has. So I think he just changed the has to a have, unless anybody disagrees. We're going to go through every sentence in this particular answer, so bear with me, folks. I spent a lot of the time on this. Next paragraph. While the control agencies responsible for the waiver process have been responsive, the board has been hamstrung by the duration of the waivers granted in order to I think we've got, in order to be responsive to the board stakeholders. And then I think the following sentence would read the board, so the T would be capitalized. So you take out in order to be responsive to. It should say the board, take out stakeholders, it. The board is seeking statutory authority to be able to address on its own any statutory or regulatory barriers impacting the practice of psychology. Instead of saying in the fall, did you get that, Jason?
I believe so. You wanted and continued access to care removed, right? And the sentence ending at practice of psychology.
And continued access to care.
No, that was what Ms. Cervantes added. You
That's
can
right.
undo that change.
Yeah, I think you got it, Jason. And then it's the final sentence of that paragraph says the board would only consider using this authority during a declared emergency, which makes it sound like we've got a lot of latitude. I would prefer to say something like the board would only be authorized to do so during a declaration of emergency, however that ends, a declared emergency. I think that'll make the committee members and the legislators ultimately to feel more comfortable that they've restricted our authority in this area rather than making it sound like they're granting us a broad authority.
This is a question for Mr. McGuire because I don't believe that the language that we submitted reflects this statement, because it grants the authority for us to consider waivers, and it doesn't specify when that authority would be used. And that language has already been submitted to the legislature with the COVID supplemental. So, Mr. McGuire, how should we address this issue if this statement doesn't reflect the language that was submitted to the legislature? And that language is in the addendum attached to this document. Or
we should strike the line then. If it's not true, we should strike the line.
Well, yeah, I'm fine with you striking the line. I was also gonna suggest either a footnote or a parenthetical or something to just kind of explain the discrepancy, and you can always refer to that the board further considered the language and at their April 2nd meeting and wanted to provide the most up-to-date information, noting that the previously provided information differed.
Does that distinction make sense, Dr. Phillips?
I understand what you're saying in terms of that it's not restricted to declared emergencies, correct?
Correct.
If that's the case, then we shouldn't be talking about required emergencies and limiting how we're going to use our waiver authority, because it's not really a representation of what we're proposing. If we want to restrict it to emergency situations, then we should put that in the proposed statutory language. We're asking for a broad grant of authority, and then we're saying we're only going to use it under limited circumstances. And I don't think we can represent that for the future board members.
Got it.
So why don't we just strike that last sentence, that paragraph?
That's fine with me.
And then the final sentence, the board would like to request the committee's assistance by establishing the statutory waiver authority as instead of included as set forth in the attached addendum. I just think it reads a little better. And that is my last comment on that response. Thank you for bearing with me, people.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. So, Mr. McGuire, based on Dr. Phillips' edit, how much of it was substantive and how much was technical?
Well, and you're asking because, can I ask in what context you're asking that question?
Well, if the majority of the comments are technical, what I would suggest, pending, of course, the will of the board, is that we include in the wrap-around motion at the end of this that we delegate to Dr. Phillips and Ms. Sorick an opportunity to address those comments that help the document read a little bit better, I think was the term that Dr. Phillips used. So I'm trying to get an assessment of one, how much of these comments are technical versus substantive, and then two, based on your answer, at a board level, discuss if we're comfortable just asking Dr. Phillips and Ms. Sorick on the technical pieces to resolve the language on that front.
Well, thanks for that clarification. I think that helps me frame my answer. I think so far what I've seen, I could fairly easily characterize as all technical changes. The closest to the substantive would be the strikeout of that last sentence about the board would only consider using this authority during a declared emergency. But I think since it was just kind of conforming this document to be technically accurate based on our previous submissions, I think even it could be considered technical. So to the extent that you want to just kind of streamline the motion process, I think you can consider all these technical changes. And if these type of changes continue throughout the document, I think your proposal makes sense, President Fu.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Just to turn it to the board, we can talk obviously about this item, but I'm curious to hear from board members if we're comfortable if these comments from Dr. Phillips, as he's hinted, will be reflective. If we're comfortable at some point at the end of this, delegating to Dr. Phillips and Ms. Sorick the technical aspects, and then we ask that Dr. Phillips and others keep their comments through each issue to a substantive comment. How do folks feel about that?
This is Dr. Tate. I love that idea. Anything grammatical or technical, I'd be happy to delegate to Dr. Phillips and Ms. Sorick.
And I'd be happy to do that. That'll really streamline this process, because otherwise you're going to be going through. Otherwise, I will be channeling the spirit of a recent board member, Dr. Jacqueline Horn, which I don't think is really necessary to the board unless they feel uncomfortable with the technical changes being made outside their purview.
Thanks, Dr. Phillips. So what we'll do is we'll go through maybe another issue or two, and you provide the level of comments that you've been providing, and that will give board members a sense of where your comments are, and then at that point, we can do another check-in to see if we can then just hit the highlights on the substantive pieces from you. How does that sound?
Or alternatively, I'll just restrict myself to the substantive if the board's sentiment is that they're okay not having to hear the grammatical and the syntactical.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. Board members, how do we feel about that?
This is Dr. Harpsheets. I had a couple of grammatical ones. They're important. So what about if the rest of us have some grammatical ones here or there? Should we mention them or submit them in writing if they're just grammatical?
I think if the language does not change the substance, it might be the case that we would want to have those provided in written form, unless we're catching this in real time, right? So it's one thing, what I'm hearing, at least from a couple board members, is that you've done track changes or you've marked up your own copy on this. And so in those instances where it can be shared with staff, that would be helpful. And if it's caught in real time, I think that's a separate issue. Is that helpful, Dr. Harpsheets?
Actually, I'm still unclear. So are you saying we should speak up now, or we should put them in writing to board, to the staff?
Are the comments you have already written down?
Yes, they're written down. It's further on in here, but yes. And it's really just in one paragraph and they're simple. But, I'm not going to take the time to mention them if we think that we should just communicate them to staff. They're purely grammatical and just only discuss substantive changes. I'm happy to just write them to staff.
Well, if I can just chime in, and the board has its prerogative to proceed how it sees fit, but from a staff perspective, it's really difficult on the back end for us to reconcile different grammatical input and doesn't always agree. And I just want to make sure that, because we don't go through this process very often with the legislature, and I just want to make sure we have a solid document at the end of the meeting today. That would be the staff recommendation and preference, but the board can do whatever it feels is appropriate.
Thanks, Ms. Sorek. Okay, so let's go through this a few more times, and we'll revisit the issue if sentiments change. So, Dr. Harpsey, do you have any edits on this particular item?
No.
Okay. I'm not seeing any board members unmuting themselves or hands raised, so I'm going to ask that we then turn over to public comment for item 2.
All right, Mr. Board President, I will open up the Q&A feature, and then I will let my co-moderator display our instructions. All right, so if any member of the public would like to make a comment, please use the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions. All right, Dr. Winkleman would like to make a comment. So Dr. Winkleman, you've been unmuted.
Hi, Elizabeth Winkleman from CPA. I'll keep this brief. I know this is going to be a long item. I just wanted to say I really appreciate your work on this issue regarding having more flexibility for the board and to emphasize how important these waivers have been for psychologists and for their patients during this pandemic. And also, I had raised previously whether face-to-face could be potentially interpreted as including by technology. So if there's a time to potentially discuss that here or in the future, the supervision by audiovisual technology face-to-face, but electronically has been going very well, and I think it's really making it easier for the trainees to fulfill their requirements.
All right, thank you.
Really quickly, Madam Moderator, Dr. Winkleman, if you have comments related to this item, I would not hold them until later. So if you want to bring up the audiovisual items, I would make those comments at this time.
Okay, yes, and I guess I'm asking if there's any way to include in this part of the sunset review an interpretation of face-to-face to include audio-visual, as that seems to be working very well.
Understood. Thank you, Dr. Winkleman.
Thank you, Mr. Fruth.
All right. We have no further requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
All right, it's been closed.
Turning it back for discussion, Ms. Sorek or Mr. Glass-Steagall, with regard to Dr. Winkleman's comments, would those items be included here, or would it be for some future item in our set of 23?
This item is actually part of the implementation plan for the changes to the pathways to licensure. So it is in the draft regulations that the board has approved as part of that pathways review and discussion. And we did get that feedback from stakeholders. So the regulatory language for, I believe it's 1387, would in fact include a provision that would allow for a continuance of the kind of waiver that we have been maintaining since COVID.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sorek. All right, so that issue being addressed by the fact that we're doing regulations on this, and a reminder, the sunset is a legislative proposal, and so there might be other items from the legislative proposal that we'll need to engage on the regulatory front. But we will thank you, Dr. Winkleman, for that comment, and it is being included on the regulation side. Seeing no further board comment on item 2, let's turn to item number 3.
Item number 3, the board should describe its use of 2-person committees. Additionally, the board should discuss how it ensures adequate public and stakeholder participation on the various policy and regulatory issues impacting the psychology profession.
Dr. Phillips.
I'm laughing over here. Okay. So going to the document. So we're going to do both the substantive and technical changes now pursuant to Ms. Zork's request on behalf of staff. Is that correct?
That's correct, Dr. Phillips. Take it away.
Okay. So I'll just read the language. The board currently utilizes a two-person structure for its enforcement and sunset committees. Due to the safety of enforcement staff who are instrumental in the policy discussions that take place during the enforcement committee meetings. Let me just move this comment so I can see what the hell I'm doing. But these meetings are not publicly noticed. I thought it would be stronger, given that this has been a source of concern for some stakeholders, to add the following sentence. In addition, at times, and I'll read it through quickly first time, and then if it sounds okay, I'll read it slowly for Jason. In addition, at times, confidential matters related to past disciplinary actions are discussed in order to protect the confidentiality of the complainants and licensees. It is essential that such discussions take place in a confidential setting, period. Ms. Sorek, are you comfortable with that change?
I am, and I would just defer to Ms. Monterrubio if she also agrees that that's encapsulates what we have conveyed and felt about that.
I agree with your change, Dr. Phillips. I think adding that sentence provides a little more background as to why these meetings are not open to the public.
Right. I want them to know why we're not doing it so they can see that it's reasonable that we're not doing it.
I agree.
And it's not just to get away from being transparent. So, Jason, I'm going to read that language slowly. So it would read, in addition, comma, at times, confidential matters related to past disciplinary cases are discussed, period. Unfortunately, Jason, I'm looking at my markup, so I can't see if you're able to keep up with this. And then the next sentence would read, in order to protect the confidentiality of complainants and licensees, comma, it is essential that such discussions take place in a confidential setting, period. Do you need me to repeat any of that, Jason?
Nope, I got it all.
Okay. The next sentence, and I'll ask you, Ms. Sorek, whether this is, whether you think this needs to say it or not. The next sentence says this meeting could take up to several hours going line by line through staff draft documents. Does that matter? I mean, we did that licensing committee, and that was a 3-person committee.
I think it was just trying to add a justification for why the Sunset Committee in particular should remain a 2-person. But I think if you're not comfortable with that line to provide kind of additional justification, the main concern is being able to be nimble with the turnaround time frames in which we're to provide information to the legislature, such as I think we had a week to work with the two of you to come up with some responses to the issues during our hearing, and we were not able to schedule a board meeting during that time to do that. So if you feel like that would be enough of a justification, we could just remove that sentence.
I think we should remove that sentence because I think we do that in a lot of contexts, including in a board meeting today with me. The sentence preceding it, I believe Sunset Committee should be capitalized since we've capitalized Enforcement Committee. So strike the sentence that starts with "this meeting can take." And then the following sentence I'm going to suggest should read as follows. Having a two-person committee allows for maximum responsiveness to the legislature's concerns and nimbleness in preparation for hearings.
We repeat the maximum responsiveness portion.
Yeah, hang on for a second. I'm flipping back and forth between bubbles. Having a two-person committee, take out the also, allows for maximum responsiveness to the legislature's concerns in a timely manner. So it would read, having a two-person committee allows for maximum responsiveness to the legislature's concerns in a timely manner. And then I would add one more sentence. Shortened time frames require the committee's nimbleness. You got it, Jason?
I believe so.
Okay.
So you would require the committee's nimbleness, and then there's a period after nimbleness?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
And so I would just add, Jason, that you want to make committees possessive and legislatures possessive.
Got it. And we're removing the rest of the sentence, the in preparation for.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, only one more change, and it's very small. In the middle of the next paragraph, there's a clause that says on committee recommendations. So that'd be the fourth line down, middle of the line. I think it should be of committee recommendations. And I think you can take that comma out, actually. So reconsideration and discussion, no comma, of committee recommendations. Those are my comments.
And one other quick change, Mr. Glassbeagle, there's an extra space between for and maximum on the prior paragraph. Just don't want to miss that.
Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Glassbeagle, Ms. Sorek, and Dr. Phillips. Not seeing any board discussion, I'm going to flip it over for public comment on item 3.
Thank you, Mr. Board President. I will go ahead and open up the Q&A panel and then let my co-moderator display the instructions. All right, if anyone would like to make a comment, please type "I would like to make a comment" using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference. All right, I see no requests for public comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's been closed.
All right, as promised, it is noon, so we will take a 30-minute recess for lunch, and then we will return to review the remaining 20 items out of this report. During the lunch break, I am going to ask Ms. Sorek and Mr. Glass-Steagall if you can investigate if it's possible to invite Dr. Phillips, Dr. Harpsheets, and whomever else is interested in participating in the technical edits to the document, and that they can, as we reach each item, be able to share out those items on one version at the same time. And my understanding is that Microsoft Office does allow for that type of collaboration. If it's the case when we return from lunch, that's not a possible solution, or that's not an ideal solution, certainly that can be shared. But I wonder if that could be, recognizing we're in 2021, that we have the ability perhaps to make this process be both transparent but also efficient at the same time. So that's my request to you, Ms. Sorek, and Mr. Glass-Steagall during the recess to investigate if that's a possibility. With that, the board is in recess until 12:30.